logically, the next thing I should ask you about is what is trending, which is the issue of the minimum wage. So much has been said. The workers are angry. They're saying even what is being asked for is too small, but they are ready to compromise. That's why they accepted that, and so on. Is minimum wage critical in increasing the level of productivity, or is it just that, again, because other things are problematic, that's why there seems to be a focus on this?
Okay, so yes, minimum wage is critical, but it's not the only critical thing that helps to improve productivity. Okay, but let's be clear, when people's take-home pay can't take them to the bus stop on their way home, they will begin to look for other ways to survive. And that itself begins to drive the narrative of corruption. You begin to hear people say things like, now where man, they chop, they work and ain't go chop. I mean, as though they did not, you know, and people begin to look for other ways to squeeze out and extort money and you know, inflate. So we see a lot of all that happen once people don't get paid properly. But even then, we have seen that minimum wage is not the only thing that is leading to corruption. So there are people who are well paid and are still not producing as effectively as they should because they're not well trained, because they're not well equipped, because the environment itself is working against them being able to get things done. So many businesses today, and I describe it this way, you know, I saw one of these skits on social media of some guy who had just come in from the village and he was trying to go up a downward coming escalator. And it occurred to me that, oh my, this is what's happening to Nigerian businessmen and women. You know, it's like as if we are trying to climb an escalator that is coming downward. And no matter how much you keep trying, it's like the thing is designed to bring you down because the policies and the infrastructure is not there, and access to finance is not there, and even just the pool of talent that you need to have is not there. And so to a large extent, it becomes very difficult to be productive and even more difficult to be profitable. And once you cannot be profitable, you can't increase salaries. So let's understand that minimum wage, even though it's a conversation that is happening, especially around civil service, but really, it's something that affects everybody. And that's why, of course, the private sector, organized private sector, is also part of the conversation. But it's not enough to say we must increase minimum wage, which we must, at least for where we are today. We don't have a choice. People are dying. And don't forget, in many of the states, they're not even paying salaries. Not only are they not paying salaries, in some places, even in the private sector, they're only paying half salary. It's not working. Now, but in increasing minimum wage, you have the tendency, without increasing productivity, you have the tendency to increase inflation and to get us back to exactly where we are today. So let's be clear. When you look at our consumer price index, we're exactly double of where we were when minimum wage was 7,800 naira. So we moved it to 18,000 naira, and then bang, where now inflation has caused that what you used to buy then that was not enough, that caused them to cry for minimum wage, is what's happening now. If we don't improve productivity in the next 5-7 years, we will be at that point where we're saying 18,000 naira cannot be a minimum wage, is not enough. And so we have to focus on what really matters, and that's productivity, that's value creation, that's things like manufacturing, that's things like delivering, service delivery, and the things that make us not only be able to do business with ourselves, but more importantly, be able to do business with the rest of the world. Look, the location of Nigeria is very special. It means that anything you produce in Nigeria can get to the rest of the world faster than it will get to if you were somewhere else. If we were only able to find a way, and we will find that way, by investing in power, by investing in security, by investing in infrastructure, by making sure the policies are friendly to business people, we will make sure that Nigeria becomes that, literally, the China of Africa. We will become the production force, the production base, and as we do that, I know it, we would produce more, we would increase our economic value, we would grow our economy, and then 18,000 naira will have a stronger value because we will not be importing as much as we do, we'll be exporting much more and earning, so our naira is going to strengthen and it will be able to help you buy more. That is what we need. We need a stronger economy as we increase minimum wage.
Now, something that runs through what you said, again, you've made mention of it in passing, is the issue of power. there are people I've spoken to who say, if only any government that is coming, they can leave education, leave health, leave roads, focus on the power supply problem and solve it. And then leave us alone and see what we can do. That because the power supply issue is so critical to everything, whether it's security, it's the employment and so on. I mean, if for you to become a barber, for example, one of the things you need apart from your clipper now is a generator, because you know power supply is difficult. What would you do specifically in terms of power supply? Many people will be very interested in that. Perhaps they could vote you in only on that alone.
You know, power, like you said, is such a critical thing. I think that sometimes even people who want to be a bit more spiritual say there's a reason why God said, let there be light before he did anything else. Because it really, without power, you cannot activate the potential of anything to the fullness of its capacity. So power is a problem. And because of the kind of challenges we've had with power over the years, you would notice, therefore, that, you know, again, businesses are having to power their own businesses, and you're using all your profits to power. I once, you know, the previous office that I had before this one, I had to provide my own power. For 7 years, I was running on 2 generators, a 42 kVA generator and a 27 kVA generator for 7 years. I generated my own power in Lekki. I mean, it's just a local government of Lagos State. So and that, in part, it wasn't just because we'd never had power, but every time the power comes, it will blow out all our bulbs, blow out our fridges, our computers. So we just stopped trying to connect to the power. So even when we did have power, the power was damaging our equipment. Therefore, we did not have power. We had to generate our power. So what are the challenges we're facing? Generally, challenges of power fall into 3 major categories. Number 1, generation. Number 2, transmission, and number 3, distribution. In each of these key areas, the first most important thing that you find is that corruption has robbed this sector, this critical sector, of the investment that it should have been accumulating over the years. So we have a real deficiency in investments in our generating capacities. 80% of the plants, of the generating plants that we have, are driven by gas. 20% by hydropower, that's on the Kainji dams and all of that. But when you look at it, a lot of the turbines have not even been serviced. They cannot be used. I believe I think it's Kainji that has 6 turbines, and yet only 2 of them are working. One of them is kept as a backup for one. So you see that one of the things that we have to deal with is, in a way, let's see investment get back. And I said, let's see investment get back, not only that we will invest, but through private-public partnership, be able to get investments rolling back and into power, especially power generation. But the greatest challenge that we're facing, especially with the 80% of our generating plants, is gas supply. Gas supply is a big challenge because, number 1, we don't even have enough gas let me put it this way. We have gas that we're wasting by flaring gas, but we don't have the infrastructure to be able to convert that gas into usable gas that can power our turbines. Okay, that infrastructure requires investment. That investment many times is not coming in because the cost we've limited and have captured or capped the cost of gas to our gas companies in Nigeria to, I think, $2.40. And yet, if you take it to the international market, it's going for $4, right? So you find out that it doesn't make sense for NLNG or any of those guys to try and think, how do we power your gas turbines? Because we're going to be earning just half of what it would cost us if we were going to sell to the international markets. So you need to find ways to say, look, let's see how to revisit our pricing structure for even the generation. And then that will now, obviously make that area more attractive to investors, and we need investment in that area. But then the second key area that we have a problem with power is our transmission. Our transmission has become a bottleneck for even the generation. So now we're generating capacities, and yet we're losing so much in transmission. And then there is also distribution. And we have major losses in distribution today. And even though we privatized and deregulated the distribution, we're still having major issues with technical losses, right? That comes from dilapidated infrastructure, transformers and things like that. Secondly, you've got also commercial losses, which means that where people are not even being billed for the power that they're getting, and then you actually do have collection losses, which is when people are billed, the people who have used up the power are not paying, and the biggest of all the culprits is the government itself. The government is the largest debtor of power. So to a large extent, you've got to take each one of these key areas and say, look, we must solve these problems. Now, you and I were talking just before we came on the show. There is nothing that has not yet been designed to help us solve power problems in terms of reports, in terms of research, in terms of Nigeria knows what to do. The question is, why are we not doing it? Everybody knows the answers. We're not doing this because there is no leadership will to do it. There's no desire to be able to say, let's really solve this problem. Why is there not a desire to solve the problem? And I always say it, when the people who fund the parties, your biggest donors, are the ones who import diesel and generators, then power all of a sudden looks very complicated, even though the rest of the world has solved it. I believe that power is not such a complicated problem. If Cotonou there, they can have power, and Ghana can have uninterrupted power. I believe that it's not because it's a complicated problem, it's that there are complicated people, complicated financing models for complicated parties that produce complicated candidates and elected officials who complicate the whole power problem. It is not as difficult. Remember that a little while ago, there was a gentleman who was Minister of Power, Professor Batanaji, who came in, and all of a sudden, I'm not sure whether you remember, for 4 or 5 months, it seemed like we had power. Business Day did a particular report that was amazing, that talked about how now people were no longer buying kerosene, and the next day, Batanaji was fired. That's not the big idea. I mean, that is bad enough. The next day after Batanaji was fired, in my own house in Victoria Garden City, we did not have power for 2 weeks. How could we have had power for almost 6 months? And the day after you fire one person, all of a sudden we don't have power anymore. Why is it that power always goes out around festive seasons? We know that much of what is going on around the power area, yes, there are hard issues like investment in infrastructure, pricing models. There are things that need to be done, right? And making sure that if you can generate power, you can give it without having to pass it through the distribution grid. But let's understand, much of the suffering we're going through with power is humanly induced. And it is induced by those who have the power and who must sell diesel and must sell generators so that they're able to continue to get their funding for the parties that they produce.
Mr. Durotoye, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.